Hey everyone, welcome back to Curtis's Corner. If you are new here, hi, I'm Curtis. I am the chaotic movie reviewer who talks a little too fast, gestures like I'm directing air traffic, and processes my emotions through cinema because therapy is expensive and popcorn is cheaper. Also, because if I tried to build emotional stability in a laboratory, it would immediately get struck by lightning and run away. If you're returning, hello again. Sit down, get comfortable, grab a snack. Today, we are talking about a movie that takes one of the most famous monsters in horror history and basically says, what if we gave this story some chaos, some romance, some rebellion, and a little bit of burn the system to the ground energy? You know, a light little couples activity. Today, we are reviewing The Bride. Now, before we jump into it, quick little YouTube housekeeping moment. If you enjoy horror movies, movie reviews, and watching someone spiral about weird filmmaking choices for 10 to 15 minutes at a time, make sure you hit like. Don't forget to subscribe and ring that notification bell so you actually see when I upload. Leave a comment too, because the algorithm is a mysterious beast that feeds on engagement and validation. Also, if you want to support the channel a little extra, my Patreon is linked down below. It is only $2 and it helps keep the lights on, the coffee flowing, and the movie tickets purchased, which is great because if I start generating my own lightning storms to watch movies, we are going to have bigger problems. Now, before we get into today's monster romance, make sure you check out last week's video where I reviewed Scream 7. That one was an experience. Let's just say Ghostface continues to make very questionable life choices. And at this point, Ghostface needs therapy and a better hobby. All right, let's talk about The Bride. This is the new film, directed by Maggie Gyllenhaal, and it stars Christian Bale as Frankenstein's monster and Jessie Buckley as the bride. The film takes the classic Frankenstein mythology and twists it into something that feels part gothic horror, part rebellious love story, and part chaotic outlaw movie, which honestly feels like someone took classic Universal horror and said,
what if we added feminism, crime, and emotional damage?
The basic premise is this. Frankenstein's monster exists in a world that fears and hates him. He is isolated, misunderstood, and constantly pushed away by society. Eventually, a companion is created for him, the bride. But instead of simply existing as a partner for him, she becomes something much bigger. She begins to discover her own identity, her own power, and her own place in the world. And as she does that, the two of them become almost like these mythic outlaw figures. The world labels them as monsters, but the film constantly asks the question of whether they actually are monsters or if the world around them created them. And I have to say, one of the biggest reasons that idea works as well as it does is the acting. Jessie Buckley absolutely runs away with this movie. Her performance is fascinating because she plays the bride almost like multiple personalities existing inside the same body. At times, she feels fragile and curious. Other times, she feels dangerous and unpredictable. And then sometimes she feels almost otherworldly, like she exists slightly outside of reality. The way she switches between those different states is seamless. It never feels like she is suddenly playing a different character. It feels like you are watching a mind constantly evolving in real time. There is a very eerie quality to it, almost like you are watching someone slowly become aware of their own power. It's as if self-actualization came with lightning bolts and dramatic hair. And that kind of ethereal horror energy really carries a lot of the movie. Christian Bale is also fantastic here, which honestly should surprise no one because Christian Bale does not show up halfway to anything. If that man commits to a role, he commits like a theater kid who drank 3 espresso shots, discovered Shakespeare, and then decided sleep is for the weak. This is the same man who has changed his entire body weight multiple times for different roles. If a director told him Frankenstein's monster was made of drywall and regret, he would probably spend 6 months studying drywall. Now, his version of Frankenstein's monster is very vulnerable. He is not this raging, violent creature that the world expects him to be. He's calm, gentle, soft-spoken. At times, he feels less like a monster and more like a very tall, slightly stitched together guy who is just deeply tired of everyone else's nonsense. He almost feels exhausted by violence, like the world keeps trying to drag him into chaos and he's just standing there thinking,
"Can we not do this today?"
There's this constant sense that he just wants acceptance. He wants connection. He wants to be seen as something other than the monster people have decided he is. And the sad part is the world has already made up its mind before he even has a chance to prove otherwise. That is the emotional core that really helps ground the movie. Because underneath all the gothic drama and lightning storms and stitched skin, the story is really about someone who just wants to exist peacefully and be accepted, which honestly makes him one of the most human characters in the entire film. Now, one thing I also really liked about the film is the story itself. This version of The Bride of Frankenstein leans heavily into themes of resistance and revolution. There is this idea that when one person finds their voice and refuses to be controlled, it inspires other people to start doing the same. It becomes less about monsters and more about power. Who has it? Who is denied it? And what happens when people decide they are done being silent? There is a very strong rise in power among women throughout the story as well. You watch these characters slowly push back against systems that tried to control them. And when the film finally leans into that, it actually becomes really compelling. But the movie does have some moments where it gets a little weird in ways that did not fully work for me. There's a ballroom dance sequence that happens about halfway through the movie. And listen, I love a dramatic moment. I love a visual spectacle. I love when movies decide to get a little artsy. I'm usually very on board when a film wants to get weird. But I sat there watching this scene thinking, what's happening right now? At first, I thought it was a dream sequence. Then it seemed like it was real. Then I thought maybe it was symbolic. And then by the end of the scene, I still had absolutely no idea what the purpose of it was. It looked cool. It was visually interesting. Everyone is dramatically dancing like they are at the most intense gothic prom imaginable. But narratively, it just kind of appears out of nowhere and then leaves like nothing happened. The whole time, I felt like the movie paused the story, said,
Hold on, we need a putting on the Ritz moment.
and went right back to the plot like nothing happened. And I was just sitting there slightly confused the entire time. Another thing worth mentioning, there are a lot of flashing lights in this film. Like a lot. If you are sensitive to strobe lights, this is definitely something to keep in mind because the movie uses them repeatedly throughout a few scenes. Now, going back to positives though, one thing that really impressed me was the makeup and the effects. The attention to detail here is fantastic. The film takes place in a very specific time period and every detail feels carefully constructed. The makeup especially had to be extremely precise because of the nature of these characters. You have stitched skin, you have scars, you have very specific placements of wounds and prosthetics that need to remain consistent from scene to scene. And then there is the detail on the bride herself after she's brought back to life. Throughout the film, you can see the dark staining from that black ooze that came out of her body when she first wakes up. It's around her mouth, along her neck, streaked across her arms and her hands. And the film is very careful about keeping that placement consistent every time we see her. It never randomly disappears or shifts positions. It always looks like the same stains that dried onto her skin from that moment she came back. And the film does a really great job maintaining that continuity. It adds to the realism of the world and makes the characters feel physically believable. Another aspect I really enjoyed was the Bonnie and Clyde style relationship between the bride and Frankenstein. Now, full confession, I've never actually watched the original Bride of Frankenstein movie, and I've also never watched the Bonnie and Clyde. So if you came here expecting a deep historical comparison between those stories, you came to the wrong laboratory. But I know the general idea and the cultural impact of those characters. And Blending these concepts together here actually creates a really interesting dynamic. Instead of presenting them purely as terrifying monsters, the film treats them more like tragic outlaws. Two people the world immediately labels dangerous the moment that they exist. They are basically this chaotic little power couple running around causing problems while society collectively panics about it. They are people that the world decided were monsters. And that shift in perspective makes their story feel more human, because the movie keeps asking the question of whether they were actually monsters or if the world just decided they were and never gave them another option. But unfortunately, the film also struggles a little bit with the side characters. There are quite a few people who appear throughout the movie, disappear for long stretches of time, and then show up again later. And a lot of them do not actually contribute much to the story. They feel more like background players than fully developed characters. Peter Sarsgaard's character especially felt strange to me. The movie gives us a backstory where he explains that he had a previous connection with the bride, but the film never really shows us any of that history. We just get a quick explanation, and then we are expected to emotionally invest in that relationship. It never quite lands because we never saw that connection develop. It felt a bit like someone walking into a room and saying,
"Just so you know, we had a very emotional past together."
and everyone else is just nodding politely like,
Sure, okay.
Penelope Cruz's character also falls into the interesting but slightly awkward space. The idea behind her role actually makes sense. She represents someone slowly stepping into power and becoming more important as the story unfolds. While the bride is slowly spiraling into the chaos of the world around her, Penelope's character is kind of doing the opposite. She is rising through the system, gaining influence, becoming someone people eventually have to listen to. So you have this interesting contrast. The bride is out there becoming a symbol of rebellion and downfall, still speaking for the people, but also burning through society like a lightning strike. Meanwhile, Penelope's character is climbing upward through the structure itself. It is almost like one is tearing the system down while the other is quietly learning how to control it, which is a really interesting idea on paper. But she enters the film halfway through, and most of the other characters barely acknowledge her presence. So when the story starts positioning her as important, it does not quite hit as strongly as the movie probably wanted it to. It feels a bit like someone suddenly announcing,
This character is important.
and the audience is still trying to remember when they showed up. Another thing that felt odd was the main villain, if you want to call him that. The film sets this person up at the very beginning like they are going to be a major threat. Big introduction, big energy, very dramatic, and then they barely show up. They have maybe 3 scenes in the entire movie. One of them happens during the credits, and the whole time I kept waiting for this character to become intimidating. But it never really happens. It feels less like a terrifying villain and more like someone who briefly clocked into the villain role and then went home early, which leads into another issue. The police in this movie are spectacularly bad at their jobs. Every single one of them. No one listens to each other. No one makes good decisions. They constantly make situations worse. It feels like watching a group project where everyone forgot to read the instructions and the one person who did read them left the room 20 minutes ago. There is one cop during that ballroom scene that I mentioned earlier who makes a decision so unbelievably stupid that I genuinely sat there wondering if this man had ever experienced a single logical thought in his entire life. It was chaos. But going back to one of the strongest emotional elements of the movie, I really liked how the film portrayed Frankenstein himself. He is not driven by violence. He actually tries very hard to avoid it. He wants peace. He wants connection. He wants to exist without constantly being hunted or feared. There is something very tragic about that. You are watching a character who the world has already decided is a monster. And no matter how gentle he tries to be, that label never goes away. And the movie really leans into that idea. Now, one final element that confused me a little was the inclusion of Mary Shelley. She appears at the beginning and kind of explains her role in the story. And at first you think,
Okay, interesting. The original author is involved in the narrative. That could lead somewhere fun.
But
As the movie goes on, it slowly starts to feel like the plot would have unfolded almost the exact same way, even if she had never shown up in the first place. Which is a little ironic, because she is technically the person who created the whole mess to begin with. In some ways, it almost feels like her involvement is what triggered a lot of the chaos. Like, she walked into the story, flipped a few narrative switches, and then quietly stepped back while everything exploded. So by the end, I was still sitting there wondering what her exact narrative purpose was, because the movie introduces her like she is about to be a major part of the story, and then the story mostly just continues doing its own thing. So where does that leave us? The Bride is still a really interesting film. The acting is excellent, the atmosphere is strong, and the movie has some really compelling ideas running through it. But the pacing issues, the underdeveloped side characters, and a few confusing narrative choices keep it from fully coming together. Honestly, this movie feels like something that was put together with a lot of care and a lot of great ideas, but a few of the pieces do not quite connect the way the movie thinks they do. The heart of the film is strong, the performances are great, the themes about power, rebellion, and identity are really interesting, but every now and then, the story wanders off. A few characters show up and disappear like they missed their cue, and the pacing can feel a little uneven. So with all of that being said, I'm giving The Bride a B-. It's kind of like watching a very impressive science experiment that mostly works, but every once in a while a spark flies out and you're not entirely sure that was supposed to happen. Still, if you enjoy gothic horror, strange romance, and stories about outsiders fighting against the world that created them, there is definitely a lot here to enjoy. And that brings us to the end of today's review. If you enjoyed this video, make sure you like and comment below, subscribe, and ring the bell, summon a lightning storm, revive a corpse, whatever it takes for the algorithm to notice us. Also, check out my Patreon if you want to support the channel a little extra. Again, it is only $2 and it helps keep everything running over here at Curtis's Corner. And one more thing, I do have a little surprise project coming very soon that I can't fully talk about yet. It involves another person and something new that I have been working on behind the scenes. All will be revealed soon. Let's just say chaos might be coming. All right, that's it for today. Thank you for watching. Thank you for hanging out with me. And remember, if someone offers to build you a romantic partner in a lightning-powered laboratory, maybe ask a few follow-up questions first. I'll see you all in the next video.